Welcome to Falling into 40 with Bailey and Jessica.
Welcome back to Falling into 40 with Bailey and Jessica. We have been out for a couple of weeks and we are both excited to be here. And I haven't actually seen Bailey in human form in a while, so it's good to see you, Bailey.
It's good to see you too. I just feel like we kind of fell into a crazy couple of weeks where both of our kids had activities that we were kind of split two ways at. We just came back from a week in the Frisco area at PGA Frisco at nationals for golf. A week anywhere just it takes it out of you, and especially in heat and humidity, which I can do heat okay, but it's the humidity part that was hard to get through. I don't like feeling just wet all day.
Yes, we forget that when we live out here in dry West Texas, that the heat is bad, but it's so much worse when the air is thick.
What have y'all been up to? I see you have a new background.
I do. I'm in my new room. It used to be a porch, but we had it enclosed and I just love it. Once I have it filled and the things that I want in here, I will be even more excited. So, but we've been golfing too. My boys have both been playing the NTGP. You know what I'm talking about. The North Texas Junior Golf Association, right?
Yes.
Okay.
NTPGA. Yep.
Yes. Okay. And as you know, they get to have caddies when they're in the prep tour. And when I played in these, we didn't get caddies. But I want you to know, I have learned a lot. Not about golf, but just about the way my children are on the golf course, their competitiveness, how they shut down and when they shut down during a round. And I do want to share a not so perfect moment, because I think far too often we show our perfect parts and not our terrible parts. But last week, there was a day I was caddying for my youngest son, and he was being awful. I mean, he was angry at the way he was playing. And so he, instead of handing me a club back to get, I'm the caddy, I'm supposed to put his club, put it back up. He like puts it out, extends it towards me, and then lets it go. So it falls to the ground. And I mean, I can feel my blood pressure. Like I can feel my heart beating in my head. And I said, pick it up, hand it to me. And the other people we're playing with, seeing it too. So not only am I mad, I'm embarrassed. And I also know, part of me knows that that's not how my child normally acts, but under no circumstance is that behavior okay. So right. I said, pick it up. So he picks it up and gives it to me, and I put it in there, and we're kind of talking. I'm talking as we're walking to the next hole. And it was like,
I can only imagine.
You better get it together. This is not how we behave. It is just a game. I'm sorry you're not happy with the outcome right now, but get it together. Only you can do that. Okay. So that was like my encouraging, angry moment. Well, a few minutes later, I found myself saying, you know what? I am never caddying for you again. And he said, okay. So not only was my remark not okay to say, I was never going to caddy for him again. That was a mean thing to say out of anger. And two, his okay response goes to show how angry he was as well. But we got that all figured out. And, we're working on it. It's hard when you see that their passion is in the right place, and you know that they don't want to win just to win, but they want to win because they love it, and they've been practicing and they've been working really hard. and it's an individual sport right now. So it's just all on them. And you see them wanting that, but it's not coming to fruition on that day. As everybody knows, golf is day to day, shot by shot. So it's hard to see that frustration, but I guess learning how to, use it correctly and to be able to work through the problem and just kind of get out of their heads. I mean, it's more of an adult thing to be able to do. You know what I'm saying? Just to be able to step back for a second and say, okay. And so with all of that being said, they still don't get to act like brats on the course. And if they do, there are consequences. And now they can't get rid of me as a caddy because I'm going to make sure that they don't act like that. So anyway, we've had fun. It's been a good summer of golf. Anyway, there you go.
I will tell you, as the parent of a much older golfer now that's starting to kind of come into her own, those lessons that she learned young about keeping her cool and using things that are frustrating and anger in a different way, those things that you're teaching them now, even though they're frustrating for you because y'all are both going through them, those coping skills you're teaching them right now are going to be so advantageous to them when they get older, especially because they're learning them at such a young age that they'll be able to cope through that a lot better, and they can help others cope through that as well. So it is difficult right now, and we had to learn a lot of, you're still going to have etiquette, you're not going to lose your head. And there are some times that she still lets her frustration get the best of her a little bit, but whenever you're playing for a team, it's a different story, and you have to rebound pretty quickly, or you're going to see your score sail into the sky and be very high if you hold on to that throughout the round. And so they're hard lessons to learn, but it's good that they're learning them early.
Yes, thank you for saying that. Hopefully these will all be something that we all take something from and learn for the future game of golf in this household.
Golf is a frustrating sport even when you're an adult. So I feel like they're learning life skills, if not just golf skills.
Here we are. It is July the 16th, 2024. And I think this is kind of what we want to say is the start of our second season. And, we started out in February and here we are in July, and it's maybe time to look at all the things that are going on around us, not only with our families, but current events, big things, little things, but talking about a few things that may be a little bit uncomfortable. So with that, I think everybody knows. And if you didn't know, I feel like you might be living under a rock somewhere. And maybe that's where some of us want to be living. But right now, our country is completely divided, and divided so much that we're at a scary point. And kind of like we were just talking about with golf and my child getting angry and acting ridiculous, we have adults acting like that. And it has become so divided that people can't even befriend somebody who believes differently than them on a political level. And political violence is on the uprise, and it has been for years. But saying all of those things, I'm going to stop and let you talk for a minute. Like, what are your thoughts on where we are right now? How do you feel? Do you feel scared? Do you feel nervous about this election year specifically?
Well, going back to, transitioning into a new season of our podcast, a second season, and kind of tackling some of the harder things to talk about. We both said when we first sat down and brought this idea of a podcast together, we both said that eventually we wanted to get to a point where we could talk about the hard things, because it's our real life. I mean, this is where we're at. This is what season we're in of life. And so the hard stuff, the uncomfortable stuff, that's what we're living. And so to transition into that, I think is important. I think the first season was very successful. We, tackled some things that we were going through with parenting and stuff like that. But I do think it is time to transition into some of the hard. And unfortunately, it seems like every year when we get to a new election season, you're just sitting there waiting to see what is going to happen next. A few elections ago, there was the Zika virus and things like that, but it didn't hit us close to home. And then last election, we had COVID, and it hit close to home, and it was everybody, and it lasted, and it still continues to affect lives and affect people. But now this new season came. The election's happening in November, as far as we know, unless something changes. But you're just waiting, or I am, to see what's going to come up in the news that is the new thing that our nation is going to face because of the impending election. And it has nothing to do with side versus side. This is real life, and it affects everyone. And so the political violence that happened a few days ago, that affects everyone, because then it starts to initiate fear, and it puts fear in the minds of everyone. And then you're wondering, okay, can I go out to these public events? Can I go out to these places and feel safe? And so to take people's feeling of safety away is controlling our lives and our emotions. And so that's something that I'm having kind of difficulty with in all of this, because for me, I've never been super comfortable discussing politics, discussing my opinion or the way that I feel about certain things, not because I am worried what people will think of me, just because it's not worth it. At the end of the day, people feel the way they feel. I appreciate hearing people's opinions and the way they feel about things, but I'm not going to argue or fuss with anybody over it. The fact of the matter is everything that's been happening over the past couple of election seasons is taking away our feeling of safety and our feeling of peace. So that's the part that I'm struggling with, at least right now.
And I love that you said that, because that's exactly what it's done. And something that I can't wrap my mind around is that we are a country that was founded on all of these basic human rights. And, one of the greatest things about living in America and living in a democracy is that we get to have opinions, and we get to vote, and we get to have these things, and it's such a gift. And suddenly it's turned into, but if you're not thinking the same way I'm thinking, then you're absolutely wrong. And we can't have a conversation. In fact, it's a segregation almost, it's them versus us versus them. And that's not a peaceful way to live.
I have a question. Do you think that the change has to do more with social media and our methods of communication, and people feeling much more comfortable behind a screen saying what they're saying or expressing what they're expressing, rather than back when we were younger and there was no social media? And yes, there were advertisements and things like that. Politics weren't so in your face all the time. I feel like now you get so many thousands of opinions every single day that you're reading through, and more people are expressing the way they feel about it, that it's just really hard to even know what's real and what's not. And so then people are fighting over things that sometimes aren't even real. And so then it just starts to create this divide and this fighting over something that's not even real. And so I don't know.
No, I think that's a great way to look at it, and it's true. Number one, I think that if there was a I'm sure there is, and I haven't looked it up, but if there was a poll across America that asked, how much do you trust the news? How about we
Mhm.
just say the news? Even the networks have gone after one another, and you know this one's known for being conservative, this one's known for being liberal, and you can have a conservative network and a liberal network report on the same event, and you get two totally different stories. And so that tells me that I'm just hearing opinions. I'm not getting facts. I don't need to hear the opinions. I want to know, when it comes to important things like the unbelievable, devastating, terrifying incident, the assassination attempt on former President Trump the other day, can we just have the facts?
Mhm.
It immediately, instead of becoming about just him and his well-being and the people there, the man that lost his life, suddenly it was just a missiles firing right back and forth at whose fault it was. And I don't know whose fault it is. I'm not here to point a finger and say that. I think it's terrifying. It would have been terrifying if that had been our current president, Joe Biden. I mean, no matter what, that's not okay. It's scary. And I think that we have been given so many opinions that we read through the day on different social medias, different platforms, that who knows what's what anymore. And so that's kind of where I think that we have to get back to praying for our country. And the one thing I do know is that God is sovereign. He knows what the plan is. He already knows what's going to happen to this nation. He knows what the
Mhm.
polls are going to say. And he also is, I think, telling us that we need to turn to him. It tells us in Second Chronicles 7:14 that we need to humble ourselves and seek him and pray to him. And as a nation and as a Christian, it's I feel like that is the number one thing that we absolutely have to do. You can have your opinions, you can agree and disagree, but at the end of the day, we've got to pray for our nation, and we need to love one another. You don't have to discuss politics. I've got friends that don't believe anything like I believe on all different types
Mhm.
of things, not just politics. And guess what? I love them and they love me. That's that.
No, I totally agree with that. I think it does come down to that because think about it this way. So think about where we are right now, 2024, and how many differing opinions and how many more avenues of social media and how many more um, websites and things like that we have than even just 4 years ago and 4 years before that. I just feel like when our kids get to be our age, what is that going to mean for them? And how much worse is it going to get as far as dealing with a lack of peace and a lack of feeling of safety? And I don't want that for our kids. So I think you are absolutely right. The only answer is turning to God.
And I think, we have for too long taken our freedoms for granted. And here we are, we're living in a time where we're split. You're this or that. And if you don't, you're going to stick out, you know what I'm saying? You're either this or that. But there's so many things that we can be thankful for right now. And I think that this is when Americans should really think about what could be if we don't get ourselves as a nation under control. But it's at least we're not Iran.
Mm-hmm.
They had a presidential election, which will now move to a runoff. It was extended by 2 hours due to a low voter turnout because Iranians know the results don't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Their supreme leader runs the country, and there's nothing that anybody can do to stop him. Nor are we China. We talk about China so often in our political world. And they recently threatened the death penalty for anyone in the country who supports Taiwan's democracy. We aren't Russia, whose president launched an invasion of Ukraine that's now killed more than 469,000 Russian troops. We aren't North Korea, whose dictator has threatened a nuclear launch, despite that it would devastate his nation. So, as flawed as we are right now, and as scary as it is, I hope that there will be enough people, enough Christians stand and pray and unify on that, whether they're whatever political party they consider themselves a part of, that they will stand together and pray for the right leader for our country, and that we continue to just seek God throughout this entire process, no matter what the outcome, but that the violence and that the hatred would end. I think that those are things we have to keep praying for.
One of my hopes and prayers is that it doesn't come down to that the American people feel like their vote doesn't matter or that their voice doesn't matter. And I feel like, just based on, some of the things that are happening, if we're not careful, that can start to happen, where people are like, well, I'm not going to vote because of XYZ, or I'm not going to vote because it's not going to matter anyway. And that's the last thing we need to be doing, is not thinking that our voices matter and not thinking that it's going to count, because at the end of the day, then that's not America, and that's not what we were founded on. But, I was even thinking about just political issues and social political issues and how they've changed over time. There's so many more social issues now, mostly because of technology and social media. And it is causing even more of a divide. And so that's something that I feel like all of the bickering over the things that at the end of the day, you're just fighting to fight. That's I don't know.
Well, I think that that's a great way to put, people are fighting to fight. And we've all heard the saying that hate breeds hate. Yes, it does. And, it takes 2 seconds to get somebody who maybe isn't stable enough to handle all of this stuff that's being thrown out, and all of a sudden they've read something that isn't quite true. I don't know. Just like the guy that attempted to assassinate former President Trump. I don't know why he did that. What made him think that that was the answer? Thank God that that didn't take place, because it would have made this side so much madder at this side. And it's really, I think it's everybody's fault, Bailey. I think that everybody has contributed to this. And I think that we have come to a point where maybe we've taken it too far, that we live in the land of the free. Like, to what extent is freedom to you? The things that are being debated and the things that people are arguing about, number one, they're fighting to fight, and they're fighting because they think it's their right and it's their freedom. And in my own mind, I'm thinking, why was this ever even brought to somebody's attention? I mean, we've gotten so far from helping each other out, being good neighbors, getting to know people, and having good conversations with people and listening to their reasoning and learning from them. I think it only makes you smarter to know why the person that believes totally different than you, why they believe the way they do and what ground they stand on. And it doesn't have to be that they're right or wrong. It can be that you just listened and it was a different perspective. I don't always 100% agree with most anything any politician says or a party says. There's a lot that I think, whoa, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have conversations. And it's okay to not be 100% all the way, one way or the other. And I think it's interesting that President Trump's running mate, Senator J.D. Vance. Okay, what I think is interesting is he used to be a very big critic of President Trump. And he has openly said some things then and now. But he said, I was really unsure of this and that. And now I see where he was going with that. And I actually see that I was wrong. And to me, it's like, why can't we get back to just being okay with saying, man, I really screwed up?
I'll just be honest, because going into our conversation today, I got really, really nervous, because anybody who knows me knows this is not a thing that I discuss that much. It's not something I've ever found comfort in. I'm always interested in learning about what other people believe in and feel. I'm never going to judge it. But it's not a conversation that ever just has really come up with friends. So this is something where, not to sound ignorant or anything like that, it's just a fact. And it doesn't matter, because the way I feel about things, kind of like you said earlier, it changes constantly based on the situation. And so I will tell you, I went into this conversation feeling a little bit uncomfortable to talk about it. And I feel like if you ask many more people our age, especially, they would say the same. It's not something that we just openly talk about. It's not how I was raised, to talk about politics and things like that. And so my parents had their opinions of it, but they, again, even at my own house, it wasn't a topic that came up as often as I think it does now. But I do think it's important that we educate our kids on what's
Yes.
happening, so that maybe in the future we can avoid some of the things that are going on right now. Because, yeah, I watch it all unfold and I'm like, oh my goodness, what is happening?
It's funny that you say that. There's still some people in our family that are very adamant that it isn't anybody else's business who they voted for. And I think that's fine. I mean, 100%. But when I have these conversations with my kids, I tell them, these aren't things that you need to be discussing at school or with your friends, because you don't know enough about these things. But this is what's going on. We don't watch a whole lot of the news, but we had it on the other day. I could kind of hear the fear in their voices, like, what does this mean? What's going to happen? And so we just need to be praying. The Bible is so clear that loving one another, if we don't love one another, then how can we love God? And there are so many people that hate has filled their heart over political issues. And the thing is, I don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen, but God's got this. Whatever happens, our job is to keep praying. And it doesn't matter. It does tell us in the Bible, in 1 Timothy 2:1-6, that we are instructed to pray for all people, even those in leadership who have authority over us. It doesn't say if the guy you picked for president is in office, pray for him. No, it says even those in leadership who have authority over us. So our job is to pray. And I feel like instead of fighting, instead of all of the craziness right now, the world needs to see Christians stand up and choose peace over conflict. And you talked about being scared. I've talked about it. But a note from our sermon this past week said trust versus tremble. And Psalms 56:3 is a verse that my mom taught me when I was a little girl, because I was often scared. And it's, what time I am afraid, I will trust in God. And so all of these things that I know to be true are in the Bible. And so I can know that I don't have to be scared. And when I start to feel scared, I need to remember or fearful. Scared isn't always the right word, or worried or anxious, but that I can pray. I've got a direct line to God, and all I have to do is have a conversation with him and pray for our leaders, no matter who they are, and pray that our country would open its eyes and that we would begin to love each other as we should, and for the hatred to stop. And I am absolutely so far from perfect, it's not even funny. I am a sinner, and I'm thankful that Jesus loves me and died on the cross for me. We just need to love one another.
I'm gonna sneak this one in there. Love one another as I have loved you.
Yes.
John 15:12.
Yes.
And I think that you are 100% right. At the end of the day, whether you're comfortable talking about it, not comfortable talking about it, whether you're ride or die one side, ride or die the other side, whether you're in the middle, whether you're playing a neutral party, at the end of the day, regardless of the feelings of anybody, what it boils down to is love and acceptance, regardless. And that's what I feel like our country needs so much more of. I know it's kind of cliche, but it's just love and loving one another as God has loved us, period.
Yes.
And end of story. Not taking into consideration what political beliefs are, what social beliefs are. Yes, I mean, who you surround yourself with is important. We have gone over all of this stuff, but that doesn't mean you don't show people compassion and love, period. I just think that is so important.
And I'm glad you said it. You just feel weird talking about it sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't want to step on anybody's toes. But what you just said, that's why, because we just need to love one another. It doesn't matter to me what your political standing is, but I do know what God says, and it's what you just said. It's straight from the Bible.
Yes.
Well, the last that I have to add to this, 2 quick things. Being loud doesn't always work, but love speaks volumes. And so that ties into what you just said. And then lastly, the answer to our country's problems isn't a political party. The answer is the gospel of Jesus Christ. It is only him who can change hearts and minds with faith. It's the time for Christians to pray, to stand up, and to be a kingdom of priests. And I just urge anybody that's listening to forgive me if I fumbled over anything and sounded a little ignorant. But the truth is that last part that Bailey and I both spoke about, I know for sure that loving one another and that praying and being who God called us to be, praying for our country and praying for our leaders, our future leaders, whatever it holds, and trusting him is really all there is. That's the part that we can play in this, instead of adding to it with, the negative and the hatred. So that's all I've got. Okay, whether you're falling into 40, face planting into 40, stumbling, already been there, way past, not even close, whatever you are, whether you're Republican, whether you're Democrat, whether you're whatever, we don't care. Come back and hang out with us and know that we love you and we appreciate you.
We love our listeners and we're so excited for season 2. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for tuning in with us on today's episode of Falling into 40. You can find us on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts.